we actually did an experiment in a school of chefs. So it was also related to something that is creative, that has to do with food. And the main idea that was within the study was that people try to do and to leverage at the best their options and creativity when they are in a situation of constraints. The point that is related to that, though, also has to do with the ability of people in that specific moment actually to recognize in themselves the energy to actually take the constraint as a challenge. This very much depends on the emotional condition of the person that is doing that, and also on the willingness to undertake the challenge.
Like from the perspective of art practice, constraint is very important. That when you think about a project that you're going to do, that generally, once you put in the constraints, you can go deeper. If you can do everything, you just stay on the surface. But when you start working on things and you say, I'm going to do a series and I'm going to confine it to these kind of tools and these kind of things, it gives you the room to think deeper and more creatively. It gives you room to be creative because you aren't thinking about everything. And then you can go deeper. So I think a lot of what you said is reflected very much in how artists work and what artists do. So hopefully the world has been learning from artistic practice in these times. From living in Southeast Asia, this is the third pandemic. Because there was SARS and then there was MERS and now there's this. So I think about it more like economic downturns. They're periodic things that will happen on we don't know how regular, but on a semi-regular basis. Just like we had the economic crisis in 2000, and then the crash in 2008, and now we have this. It's a similar kind of thing, and we have to think about these things not as temporary or permanent, as much as thinking about them as things that there's always a possibility of them returning.
So what I try to teach is actually exactly to overcome the barriers that might emerge for large corporations to actually make innovation happen and not to lose the touch with the market. It's interesting that this person, was putting it together with fragility, because this has a lot to do with fragility. What I think about fragility, and fragility again cannot be taught, right? But what you can teach people is to try to, first of all, see fragility as a strength and not as a weakness. And second, to actually scout fragility in other people. And why is this important? Because this creates empathy. Empathy is one of the main drivers of innovation, because you cannot create innovation if you do not empathize with for the person you're trying to innovate for, right? To create something new for and value for.
I was going to say, one of the things that this is reminding me of that I always love is the French philosopher Maurice Blanchot would talk about the act of being the writer and saying the writer can never be the same as the audience, but yet the writer has to write as if they are the audience. They write as if they are the reader yet to come. And that whatever you do, you have to keep in mind that you may not be exactly like the people that you're addressing this to, but you have to put yourself in their place enough to actually be able to make the creative work.
What I was mentioning before, collaboration allows you to reach much larger goals. But of course, collaboration implies that you share the pie with someone else, right? And I think that the 2008 crisis you were mentioning was already like a signal of the unsustainability of the system of capitalism that we were building, and that was probably again accelerated by the technology since 2000 forward, right? I think this is something that somehow needs to be put on the table. The problem is how you change it, and to change things you need to change the system of incentives. There is no other way you can actually move people motives unless you actually change the system of incentive. If what pays out is the value that is in the stock market, I think we are very far from something that is not the capitalism of supremacy. Are the incentives doing that need to change? I think showing that the most successful companies are not the ones that do better in the stock market, but maybe that create some value for communities that are less privileged, for example. These are things that we should put on the table as a variable dimension to really measure the success of a firm.